Just when we thought we had seen the worst of Africa's democratic decline, another chilling chapter is written, this time in Togo. A country already burdened by decades of authoritarian rule is now witnessing an even more brazen betrayal of its people. In full view of the world, and without a single bullet fired, President Faure Gnassingbé has altered Togo's constitution. Not to improve it, not to strengthen democracy, but to quietly, legally, and cynically extend his grip on power, potentially for life. No term limits, no direct elections, no accountability, just control, cloaked in the language of reform. If you're watching this and believe people deserve better, tap the like button. It helps amplify stories they don't want you to hear. What's even more disturbing than this constitutional hijacking is the deafening silence. The same voices that condemned the military-led transitions in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are now quiet. No media storm. No diplomatic uproar. Just a shrug, because this time, tyranny showed up wearing a suit and quoting the law. Apparently, when authoritarianism dresses like democracy, it gets a pass. Think about that for a moment. Then ask yourself, what is democracy in Africa? A system meant to serve the people, or a stage set for elites to cement their reign? Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. This conversation belongs to all of us. In Togo, a quiet but seismic shift happened recently. Faure Gnassingbé, already in power for nearly 2 decades, was appointed to a newly created role, President of the Council of Ministers. On paper, it sounds like a bureaucratic title. In reality, it's a throne, one without a timer. This new position, born from last year's constitutional rewrite, holds the true executive power. It's not ceremonial. It's permanent. It answers to no election cycle, no term limit, and, most dangerously, no people. To understand how chilling this is, we need to go back to the moment it all changed. Last year, without fanfare or debate, Togo scrapped its presidential system. No more direct elections. Instead, a parliamentary setup was installed, conveniently controlled by the ruling party. The illusion of choice, gone with the stroke of a pen. For decades, Togo's citizens, though often manipulated, at least had the opportunity to vote for their president. That illusion is now completely shattered. Under the new system, the parliament, not the people, chooses the leader. And guess who dominates that parliament? This is not just policy, it's a silent coup. A re-engineering of power that ensures Faure never has to leave. No need for elections when your loyalists do the voting for you. And if you're feeling the weight of this truth, if you're wondering how this is still happening in 2025, share this video. Let others see what's being done under the mask of democracy. For Gnassingbé knows power well. He inherited it in 2005 after the sudden death of his father, Gnassingbé Eyadema, who ruled Togo with an iron fist for 38 years. And now, with this maneuver, Faure is on track to not just match, but surpass, his father's reign in control, in impunity, in permanence. But this wasn't done through tanks or violence. It was done with pens, paperwork, and parliamentary obedience. A masterclass in authoritarianism that doesn't break democracy, it slowly hollows it out until nothing real remains. Come July 2025, there may still be elections in Togo. But don't be fooled. The outcome has already been decided. Because the seat that matters, the one with real power, is no longer up for a vote. Faure has taken it, and written himself in ink no ballot can erase. And yet, for all its legal gloss, this is not governance. This is monarchy in disguise. The people no longer choose their future. The future is decided for them. So where is the outrage? Where are the massive protests? Where is the spark? The reaction, while swift among activists and opposition leaders, has been heartbreakingly muted. Yes, some brave souls took to the streets of Lomé. But the turnout was small. And that speaks volumes. Not because people approve of this regime, but because they're exhausted. They've protested before. They've fought before. And every time, they've been met with silence, bullets, or both. If this story resonates, if it angers or saddens you, don't scroll past. Like this video and subscribe for more untold stories like this. Together, we can push these truths into the light. This isn't just political fatigue, it's generational trauma. Faure's father ruled for nearly 4 decades. Add Faure's tenure, and the Gnassingbé family has held power in Togo for 58 years. That's not a presidency, that's a dynasty. Over half a century of one family shaping the destiny of an entire nation. Under the veil of elections. Wrapped in the language of law. But built on fear, suppression, and broken promises. The truth is this: the people of Togo have not given up. They've been beaten down, worn out, repressed. Each time they rose, they were crushed. And now, many live with the haunting question: what's the point? And maybe you're asking yourself the same thing. But this is exactly why your voice matters. Share this story. Wake up someone who's still asleep to what's happening. Togo's betrayal didn't begin with Faure. It began in 1963, when his father played a key role in the assassination of Togo's first elected president. 4 years later, he overthrew another leader and took the throne. For 38 years, Ayadima ruled with brutality, his army loyal, his people silenced. One of the darkest moments came in 1993, when soldiers stormed through Lomé, shooting indiscriminately. 12 civilians died that day. Over 300,000 fled. That wasn't law enforcement, it was a warning: dissent would not be tolerated. When Ayadima died mid-flight in 2005, Faure was rushed into power by the military, skipping all legal protocols. A coup in everything but name. He briefly stepped down, but returned via a sham election. From that moment, a new chapter of manipulation began. Every time Faure's term limits neared, the constitution was adjusted just enough to keep him in office. Again and again. A slow-moving theft of the people's power. Now, with his appointment as the president of the Council of Ministers, the most powerful post in the country, Faure no longer needs to pretend. He rules openly, endlessly. And what has this decades-long rule brought the people? Poverty, corruption, broken systems. Togo, a land rich in gold, diamonds, limestone, and uranium, is one of the poorest in West Africa. Over 70% of rural citizens live below the poverty line. Schools crumble. Hospitals run dry. Roads fall apart. Meanwhile, the elite dine in opulence. This isn't a coincidence. This is by design. If you're still watching, thank you. You're part of a rare group that cares enough to stay informed. Please, help us reach more people. Like, comment, share. Since 2005, the people of Togo have risen in at least 5 major protest waves. The largest came in 2017. Hundreds of thousands flooded the streets. They demanded an end to the dynasty. But once again, they were met with brutal force. Over 20 people killed. A 10-year-old boy among them. Internet cut. Journalists expelled. The truth buried beneath silence. These aren't isolated incidents. This is the pattern. Speak out, get crushed. And so, many have gone quiet. Not because they don't care, but because survival has replaced hope. They live with the daily ache of knowing their voices don't matter in the system that governs them. A system that calls itself democratic, yet ignores the very people it claims to represent. If you've ever doubted the power of media silence, consider this. When military coups happen in Africa, global headlines erupt. Sanctions follow. Outrage pours in. But when an autocrat in a suit rewrites the rules and wins power through manipulation, the world shrugs. Even ECOWAS, an institution that prides itself on defending democracy, has said nothing. Not a word. Why? Because its chair, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, has his own shadow to hide. He rose through an election plagued by allegations of rigging, vote buying, and violence. He once declared, "It's my turn to rule," a declaration that mirrors the entitlement of every strongman across the continent. So of course he won't condemn Faure. He sees in Togo a reflection of what he, and others like him, may secretly wish for themselves. These aren't defenders of democracy. They're protectors of the status quo. And who suffers in the end? Always the people. Subscribe now if you're with us in calling for real leadership. Leadership rooted in service, not survival. What separates a dictator in a military uniform from an autocrat in a tailored suit? Is it the medals? The slogans? The camouflage? No. It's nothing but the wardrobe. The methods are the same: intimidation, suppression, manipulation, but one gets condemned and the other gets applauded as a democrat. And that's the ugly truth. Across Africa today, many so-called democratic leaders have become just as ruthless, just as corrupt, and just as indifferent to human suffering as the generals they criticize. Faure Gnassingbé is not an outlier. He's part of a broader, dangerous pattern. Presidents for life, reshaping laws to serve themselves, not their people. In Equatorial Guinea, Teodoro Obiang has ruled for more than 44 years. A man who, in 2003, was literally declared God by his country's state radio. Not symbolically. Literally. They claimed he could speak to the Almighty and decide life or death. That's not leadership. That's madness. And yet, Obiang remains in power, just like Faure. Just like others who've traded their people's futures for personal empires. Equatorial Guinea is rich in oil. On paper, it's one of the wealthiest countries per capita in Africa. But peel back the statistics, and what do you see? Over 70% of the population still lives in crushing poverty. Children go without school. Families go without clean water. Hospitals go without medicine. The wealth, it's funneled upward, into the pockets of those who already have everything. It's the same story in Togo. A country rich beneath the soil, but broken above it. And here's where it gets even more devastating. The issue is not just about how long someone stays in power. Monarchs have ruled for centuries. It's about what they do with that power. It's about intent, purpose, courage. Imagine if Faure Gnassingbé had led with the fire of Thomas Sankara. Imagine if Obiang governed with the integrity of Ibrahim Traore. Africa's story would be different. Togo wouldn't be a warning, it would be a model. Instead, these men chose comfort over courage, greed over growth, power over people. And the people, they pay the price every single day. If your heart is heavy hearing this, don't just feel it. Act on it. Click that like button. Share this video. Make sure the world doesn't look away. Because what's happening in Togo, in Equatorial Guinea, in far too many corners of this continent, isn't just politics. It's betrayal. It's the looting of generations. It's the hijacking of hope. And yet, hope still exists. It lives in the young Togolese woman who still dreams of change. It lives in the father who teaches his children the truth, even when it's dangerous. It lives in the silence, that thick, building silence, that history tells us always comes before the roar. Because the people may be tired. They may be afraid. But they are not defeated. Not forever. If you still believe in the power of the people to rise, to resist, and to rebuild, subscribe now. Because we're not just telling stories. We're lighting sparks. Throughout Togo, that silence we spoke of, it's not peace. It's pressure. The kind that builds, year after year, injustice after injustice, until it can't be contained anymore. It's the silence of mothers who've lost children to crackdowns. The silence of workers whose salaries haven't risen while palaces grow taller. The silence of students whose futures are trapped beneath ceilings of poverty, while the ruling elite jet across oceans. This silence isn't passive. It's waiting. Because the truth is, no matter how tightly power is gripped, no matter how many constitutions are rewritten, you cannot rule forever over a people who refuse to forget. But there's another silence, more dangerous, more shameful. And that's the silence of those outside Togo. The regional bodies. The global institutions. The Western governments that speak of freedom and democracy, yet say nothing when it's stripped away, legally, quietly, in favor of a political dynasty. Where is ECOWAS now? This is the same regional bloc that rushed to sanction Niger after a military coup. That warned of war, threatened intervention, and declared that democracy must be protected at all costs. But when Faure Gnassingbé dismantles democratic rule with a fountain pen instead of a firearm, ECOWAS looks the other way. And we ask, why? Because the chairman himself, President Bola Tinubu of Nigeria, climbed into office through an election riddled with accusations. Vote buying, voter suppression, violence. He too is accused of benefiting from a system designed not to reflect the people's will, but to protect those in power. So why would he criticize Faure for doing in Togo what he's accused of doing in Nigeria? He won't. He can't. Because what we're witnessing is no longer just isolated failures. It's a continental crisis of leadership. A fraternity of rulers who protect each other, even as their people suffer. Let that sink in. And if you believe the world needs to hear this, don't just watch. Sure. Send this to a friend. Post it. Make this silence impossible to ignore. Because behind every dictator propped up by rigged elections and hollow institutions is an international network of enablers. Foreign powers that benefit from stability, even if it's built on oppression. Corporations that extract resources but turn a blind eye to injustice. Media outlets that report on Africa only when there's a war or a scandal, but never when democracy dies in a conference room. This isn't just a Togolese problem. It's a test of global integrity. And to every young African watching this right now, whether you're in Accra, Nairobi, Kigali, or Dakar, understand this: you are not powerless. You are not voiceless. The fact that you're still watching, still questioning, still caring, that alone makes you part of the resistance. So do one more thing. Subscribe. Because these stories won't stop, and neither will we. You deserve the truth. And together we can keep telling it. It's easy to feel overwhelmed. Stories like these, of stolen futures, broken promises, and endless regimes, can make hope feel like a luxury. But hope is not a luxury. Hope is defiance. Hope is resistance. And right now, across Africa, it's quietly smoldering in the hearts of millions. Because while Faure Gnassingbé rewrites laws to cling to power, and while ECOWAS turns its face, there are still voices refusing to be silenced. Brave journalists risking everything to report the truth. Activists organizing in the shadows. Citizens whispering the words they're too afraid to shout. And make no mistake, whispers can become winds. Winds can become storms. Faure's regime may look stable. His control may feel complete. But regimes like this, regimes built on fear, repression, and a fragile illusion of legitimacy, they don't last forever. History has shown us this time and again. And to those clinging to power, mistaking obedience for loyalty and silence for consent, know this: silence isn't forever. The longer it stretches, the louder the eruption when it ends. Look at the numbers. Togo has fewer than 9 million people. Yet over 70% of its rural citizens live below the poverty line. This is not because of a lack of resources. Togo is rich in minerals: gold, limestone, diamonds, uranium. It has everything it needs to prosper. So why the poverty? Because those riches are hoarded, not shared. Because the machinery of the state isn't built to serve, it's built to extract. While schools crumble, politicians celebrate. While clinics run out of supplies, the ruling elite sip champagne. And all the while, the people are told this is democracy. If that enrages you, even a little, hit the like button. Help push this message further. Let's flood the algorithm with truth. This pattern, sadly, is not unique to Togo. Equatorial Guinea, Uganda, Cameroon. The list grows. Leaders promising development but delivering only decay. Countries rich in resources, but poor in opportunity. Why? Because the goal was never to build. It was to rule. To maintain power at all costs. To protect the palace while the streets fall apart. And the world plays along. Foreign governments shake hands with dictators if it secures contracts. Multinationals exploit the land, partner with corrupt leaders, and walk away with billions, while locals are left with polluted rivers and hollow promises. This isn't governance. This is a heist. And it's not just stealing money, it's stealing futures. So, if you're still here, if you've made it this far into the story, subscribe now. Not just because we need you, but because you need to be part of this conversation. You're not just watching history, you're part of it. And if you've already subscribed, thank you. You are the resistance to silence. You are what these leaders fear, an informed, connected, and unstoppable generation. Injustice doesn't always announce itself with tanks or sirens. Sometimes it creeps in with applause, with press conferences, with carefully worded constitutional amendments. That's what makes Faure Gnassingbé's power grab so insidious. It wasn't a coup in the streets. It was a coup on paper. And paper, when weaponized by the powerful, is just as dangerous as any bullet. They called it a reform, a move toward parliamentary democracy, a modernization of governance. But the truth? It was a strategic erasure of the people's right to choose. No more presidential elections. No more campaigns. Just quiet, calculated exclusion dressed in democratic language. This is how modern authoritarianism works. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And yet, despite all of this, the flame of resistance in Togo has never fully gone out. Even in 2017, when nearly 1 million people poured into the streets, the message was clear: we will not be ruled by bloodline. From the north to the coast, across cities and villages, Togolese citizens stood together, young, old, rich, poor, chanting for change. But the regime responded with force. Tear gas, rubber bullets, live ammunition. The internet shut down. Foreign journalists expelled. A 10-year-old boy was killed. Hundreds more injured. And what was the crime? Asking to be free. What followed wasn't just state violence. It was a strategy. Break their spirit. Drown them in silence. Make them forget what resistance feels like. And still, they rose. If you've ever doubted the courage of ordinary people, look at Togo. Look at what it means to protest when you know you might not come back home. That's not apathy. That's bravery born of desperation. That's defiance in its purest form. So if you're watching this and you still believe in the power of people over palaces, of truth over tyranny, smash that like button. Share this with someone. Let them see what silence hides. This story isn't just about Togo. It's about what happens when power goes unchecked. It's about the slow, suffocating death of democracy through smiles, speeches, and staged elections. It's about systems designed not to uplift, but to entrench. And yes, it's also about memory. Because if there's one thing regimes fear more than protest, it's remembrance. The memory of those who died for freedom. The memory of elections that were never fair. The memory of promises never kept. These memories are fuel. They are dangerous to dictators. That's why they try to erase them. But we won't let them. Subscribe now if you're tired of seeing history rewritten by those who fear the truth. Help us keep these stories alive. Help us make sure the names and faces of those who fought for justice are never lost to the fog of propaganda. Because the truth is, no matter how long they stay in power, no matter how many constitutions they bend or ballots they fake, they are afraid. They fear the day the silence breaks. They fear the day the people remember who they are. And that day will come. So here we are. Togo stands at a crossroads, not just of politics, but of identity. Will its people be forced to endure another generation under the weight of a name, a dynasty, a regime that speaks the language of democracy but silences its spirit? Or will this be the moment that history begins to shift? What we've told you today is not just a report. It's a cry from a nation that has marched, bled, and hoped for too long. It's a reminder that tyranny doesn't always come with a gun, it can come with a handshake. That elections aren't always freedom, they can be theater. And that silence is never peace, it's the sound just before something breaks. If your heart is heavy, let it be. That weight you feel, it's real. It's the sorrow of a child who never made it home from a protest. It's the frustration of a mother who can't feed her family while politicians live like kings. It's the rage of a young man who studied, struggled, dreamed, and woke up to find that his future had been sold. But let that pain become power. Because change doesn't begin with armies. It begins with awareness. It begins with stories like this, shared, spread, believed. It begins when you decide not to look away. So don't. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe. Let your subscription be a signal to the people of Togo and across Africa that they are not alone. Like this video not just for engagement, but to push it into timelines that would never see it otherwise. Share it with someone who still thinks democracy is safe just because there's a ballot box. Because every click, every comment, every view is a crack in the wall of silence. And crack by crack, we tear it down. You may not hold a seat in government. You may not have a title or a platform. But you have something even more powerful, a voice. And if enough voices rise, they become impossible to ignore. Stand with Togo. Stand for truth. Stand for the Africa our children deserve. We are not powerless. We are the people. And the people always rise.